Today, I want to once again talk about an impossible player from the 2025 rookie class. Going back in time, Harold Fannin Jr. was literally a zero-star recruit, had one offer, and was never supposed to get anywhere. But he did. He ended up becoming one of the best tight ends in college football history, one of the best players in Bowling Green history, and got drafted by the team just down the road from him. He is seen as a potential player with a ton of upside for the Cleveland Browns, and in today's video, I want to talk about the impossible rise of Harold Fannin Jr. We're going to go through his ridiculous story, how he turned one offer into being a big-time draft pick, and how all of this happened. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's get started and talk about the insane rise of Harold Fannin Jr. Okay, so in order to understand how we got to this point, we first need to go back in time. Although Harold grew up in the town of Canton, Ohio, he acknowledged multiple times that his siblings were a fan of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and after he was asked what player he liked to model his game after, he said he loved Le'Veon Bell, the former Steelers star. Fannin was a good football player throughout the years and would eventually arrive at Canton McKinley High School and was a standout on both sides of the ball. Marcus Watley was Fannin's coach at McKinley for his sophomore and junior seasons, and he had a simple reason for playing him as a safety. He said, quote, because he could do it. He was 6'3" and he could make it happen, and you couldn't outrun him, and you weren't going to outjump him, and our defense allowed him to get in the box and covered up linebackers. At 6'4", Fannin played both safety and wide receiver, and he could play any position on the field. He ended up winning the Player of the Year awards from both the Federal League and the Northeast Inland District League, and his coach said, quote, he's the definition of a football player. Sadly, Fannin's junior season was cut short due to a wrist injury, but he was still around long enough to make 42 tackles, lead the team in pass breakups with 8, and this led to 3 college football offers: Toledo, Kent State, and Akron. That number could certainly grow, and he said he would plan to choose his school after his senior season, but sadly all 3 of those offers would dry up. And that was not despite a good performance his senior year. He was a first-team All-Ohio member as he had 106 tackles, 2 interceptions, 6 forced fumbles, 4 fumble recoveries, and 2 defensive touchdowns. That's not it though. He also caught 36 passes for 600 yards and had 6 touchdowns. He was a dominating player who also returned both kicks and punts. He was going to be able to take his talents to the next level, but sadly, his grades would suffer. After a lot of hard work in the classroom though, he would finally get things together, but it was a dark moment for him. While he had tremendous ability, colleges did not feel secure enough to offer him because of his grades. He was in a deep academic hole back in 2020, and grades were just not very important to him, and it really bit him. His coach said, quote, if you tell a 16 or 17-year-old kid that grades don't matter, what do you think is going to happen? But when it came time to go to college, the NCAA still said you'd have a minimum amount of credits, and he was in a tight spot after his senior year, and he had a lot of digging to do, but he made it happen. Fannin said, quote, I just put my head down and started working. I stayed focused, believed what my coaches told me, and kept working. He eventually thanked his family as he got one offer. It was from Bowling Green. Fannin decided to verbally commit to Bowling Green and head coach Scott Loeffler, and Loeffler always really liked Fannin. He said, quote, I always played a little bit of offense in high school, and my clips from high school, the coach really liked them, and he thought I could put on a few more pounds, but it helped me translate, and he felt good whenever I was playing against safeties. So yeah, this was a great story. He refocused, got all A's and B's, and took prime advantage of the opportunity that Coach Loeffler gave him. His head coach Antonio Hall believed the situation could not have worked out much better for his star player, saying, quote, the locker room is a perfect fit. The offense is a perfect fit as well, and it seemed like everything just aligned perfectly, and he got this great opportunity. As I said, Harold Fannin Jr. did a bit of everything at Canton McKinley High School, and when the coaches at Bowling Green did show up, they absolutely loved him, but saw that he should make a switch to tight end. They put him in a 3-point stance and started seeing what he could do, and Fannin's tight ends coach said, quote, he just got in the perfect stance, had the perfect steps, and had the perfect body striking the bag. It was like, whoa, we've got something here. Harold Fannin would move to tight end, but no one really cared. Nationally, he was a 0-star recruit according to 24/7 Sports, and no one nationally knew who this guy was. But how would he end up doing at Bowling Green? Well, let's take a look. Bowling Green loves to throw the football in 2 tight end sets, and they wanted to play Fannin at the A spot. This was much more of a pass-catching position than a blocking position, and they move around a ton and are seen as a weapon in the offense. His coach said, quote, "He lines up all over the field because they're trying to create mismatches with linebackers and safeties." Harold Fannin would work ridiculously hard when he got to Bowling Green, and his position coach knew right away this guy was special, as he said, quote, "He can be a first or second round NFL draft pick. When the ball hits his hands, you never hear it, and I've seen him drop 1 pass in 3 years. As a freshman, Fannin had an interesting season, as he caught 19 passes for 218 yards and a touchdown, but also ran the ball 10 times for 4 touchdowns. This guy was just a physical freak of nature, and they wanted to find a way to get him the ball. Unfortunately, it was not all sunshine and rainbows though, as going into his sophomore year, tragedy would strike. His little sister ended up being diagnosed with leukemia in early 2021 and would eventually pass away on October 23rd of his sophomore year, and she was only 20 years old. He had put together some of the best games of his career after this point, as his mother noticed a different type of energy with her son. He caught a touchdown pass versus their game against Ball State, and she said, quote, "I was watching one game, and that was the day after her funeral, and then they had a game the next day, and he came up to me and said, 'Mom, are you going to be okay?' And then she said, 'Your sister was your biggest supporter, and she would want you to continue to carry on.'" After that moment, Fannin said he used the loss to maximize his truest potential, as he said, quote, "It probably made me realize that life is really short, so I knew I had to give it all in whatever I was doing." Fannin would end up having a really good sophomore season, as he would catch 44 passes for 623 yards and 6 touchdowns, while also running the ball for 41 yards. Again, they tried to get this guy all over the field, and Fannin was on the preseason John Mackey Award list for 2024, but nobody in a million years could have seen what he would do. All of a sudden, with Connor Bazelak as his star quarterback, Harold Fannin became the best tight end in college football, and honestly, statistically, it wasn't all that close. Obviously, Colston Loveland and Tyler Warren were spectacular, but what Fannin did has literally never been done. He ended up catching 117 passes for 1,555 yards and 10 touchdowns with one more score on the ground. It ended up starting out in week 2, as Bowling Green would travel on the road against number 8 Penn State, and despite losing by just 1 touchdown, he caught 11 passes for 137 yards and a touchdown. As I said, the lights were the brightest against Penn State, and his coach said, quote, "We were wondering what kind of Harold would show up here. We thought maybe the lights were too bright for him, but then he caught a seam route down the middle for 30 yards, and then the next play he took Abdul Carter 5 yards off the ball." And we were like, yeah, he was definitely ready for the moment. He would continue on, as he then caught 8 passes the following weekend against Texas A&M and had 145 yards and a touchdown. On the road against 2 top 25 opponents, Fannin would combine for 19 catches for nearly 300 yards and 2 scores, and showed scouts that he could play against the best. He then caught 12 passes against Old Dominion, he had 10 more against Kent State, and then at the end of the year had 10 more against Western Michigan. His best touchdown games came against Old Dominion and Western Michigan, and this guy was just berserk. Finally, he would save his best for last, as against Arkansas State in the 68 Ventures Bowl, he would catch 17 passes for 213 yards and 1 touchdown. This guy was truly insane, as he became Bowling Green's first ever consensus All-American, and in total in 36 games, he'd have 180 catches for 2,396 yards and 17 touchdowns. He may not have won the Mackey Award, but numbers didn't lie. His 2024 campaign was the best by a tight end in college football history. So here are the all-time FBS tight end records that Fannin would set. Most receptions in a season, most receiving yards in a season, most receptions per game, most receiving yards per game, most receptions in a game, most receptions in a bowl game, most receiving yards in a bowl game, and the first tight end in FBS history to lead the nation in catches and in receiving yards. Fannin was an absolute superstar, and for a guy who had one offer, he truly did deliver on his potential. But scouts were still somewhat mixed, as one said, quote, "Overall, Fannin is somewhat of an unconventional prospect. He is awkwardly athletic with stiff, restricting movements, but he plays with straight line explosiveness, and he has outstanding tracking skills and threatens to run after the catch." Bleacher Report's Dane Parson thought that Fannin was a lot like Isaiah Likely for the Baltimore Ravens, and that he was the 3rd best tight end in the class behind Colston Loveland and Tyler Warren. He also loved Fannin's ability to make plays after the catch, and while he was a little bit smaller than a typical NFL tight end, it should not have taken away from his blocking ability. One thing that would help Fannin was the fact that he was a safety while he was in high school, so he said, quote, "I have an idea of running routes or whatever, so I kind of know what makes defensive backs uncomfortable and all that kind of stuff." Eventually, he would have his draft dreams come true, as he'd be taken with pick number 67 in the 2025 NFL Draft by the team up the road, the Cleveland Browns. When asked about going to Cleveland, he said, quote, "Yeah, I'm in Canton as we speak, and I mean, growing up in Northeast Ohio, I'm definitely excited, and you know big Browns families are around, and they're all excited as well. This guy just can't leave the state of Ohio and cannot stop wearing the color orange, it seems." Prior to the draft, the NFL gave him a grade of 6.18, which would put him in position to be a, quote, "good backup with the potential to develop into a starter." This works out really well because the Browns still have David Njoku as their starting tight end, and eventually Fannin will want to take that spot. He said his ceiling is high, that he's coachable, that he wants to keep learning, and that he wants to keep growing. Getting drafted by the local team can come with challenges, such as people asking for tickets and merchandise, and while his coach thinks it will be somewhat of a struggle, he also said he has a great circle around him, and this is a huge moment for Harold. So yeah, this guy had one offer coming out of high school, was a 0-star recruit, and pretty much had no future. Instead, he turned it into the best single-season stat line for a tight end in college football history and got drafted by the team down the road. It is a pretty remarkable story, and I can't wait to see what he does next. But what do you guys think? If you're a fan of Harold Fannin Jr. or the Browns, what do you think of him, and what other rookies should I cover next? Be sure to let me know down below. Leave a like if you didn't support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out one of the videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.